Hello and welcome from my side. I'm Todor Petrov from ROIABLE, and today we're going to deep dive a little bit into the ROIABLE Intelligent Access Management, change and version management. As you see from our last demonstration, our development team has worked pretty hard day and night to develop further functionalities within the product. And you actually see those really soon. What I have here right now is a lab version which they provided for me in order to demonstrate you some really cool features around the change and version management of the product, which I think are unique across the iAM portfolio on the market. And to start off, you can find the versions on the top right corner in that drop down. Currently I have three versions, one active, personal, and shared revisions. We'll talk about this a little bit later. And what actually an active version means, that's practically the version that the configurational version of your ROI IAM, which you use with your running systems. Yeah, so this is the let's call it the default configuration. Okay. And this default configuration is kind of closed for changes. So this means it's a kind of a read-only configuration. You are allowed to do only certain particular things, and only, of course, if you're authorized. So I'll go briefly to the landscape. And what we can see here is that we have certain repository types and certain repositories. The red ones are disabled, the green ones are enabled. And actually what we can do even in an active version is, let me move this one over here. And what we can do actually is we can create a repository. So creation of a repository is not something which is version dependent, but can be done also outside of the version, of course, if you have the access to do that. And if we say create, I can give some name here, let's say GRD and SAP GRC dev as a description. We pick some events, save. And the GRD repository is created. As you see, it's created automatically by default in disabled state. So if you want to enable it, of course, you can do that, and it inherits the respective events from its repository type. We can see it here, GRD. What we see also is that what we can do is, so we have one repository here, which is IES, and IES, we are just going to disable it. So that's the other action which actually is supported in an active version. You can enable and disable repositories without the need to change the version. And there is a confirmation, of course, which asks you to do that. Okay, so let's see now actually what history has been stored. Let me bring that here again. What history is stored in our active version. We have the version management here tile. And if we click on the version 1.0 or 2.0, sorry, we can see that we have a repository created, which is today, and that's GRD. And we see also that there is a repository disabled, which is the IS01. So practically these changes, which are done outside of the version, are only audited within the active version, but they are actually not part of the changes of the version. We'll see what actually part of the changes means. Let's go one step back, and we see that actually we have a couple of different version types. We have a version called active, we have a version called imported, inactive, we have some archived versions, and we have some revisions. Let's go briefly over all of those. Active, as I mentioned already, basically you can have only one active version, and this is the version that represents your productive configuration within the system where you are currently. Yeah, this could be, in this case, this is the dev you can see here. We can be quality, production, doesn't matter. But in each of these systems, you have at least, not at least, but you must have one active version, which is the default version, which all standard processes will be using to run. Imported version means that this is a version which is coming from another system. So it was transported either from quality or from production. We don't limit the transport of versions across systems, so you can transport it from any system to any system depending on the needs you have. Then we have inactive versions. Inactive versions are X-active versions, meaning that the moment I activate another version, this 1.0 will become inactive. We'll see that later in the demo. Now let's talk about revisions, which is the interesting part. Revisions, you can think of this as your workspace. Yeah, workspace where you do actual changes or actual future changes, which you can incorporate in your versions in the future. These revisions are two different types. One type is personal, and you can see this one attached to me. And we have also a shared revision, and there I share this revision with iAM. Now, what is the difference between personal and shared revision? Obviously, the assignment of these revisions also determines the visibility here in the drop-down. So if I was not assigned to these revisions, then I would not see them also here. This is one thing. The other thing is that obviously a personal revision is a revision I can work on myself, while a shared revision is a revision I'm working together with somebody else. And then multiple people have access to one and the same revision and can perform changes in that revision. Okay, so what's actually the difference between a revision and a version? As I mentioned, a version, you can think of it as something which is kind of closed for changes. Only certain changes to certain types of versions are allowed. We'll see that also a little bit later. And on revisions actually are the real changes which are happening. And these changes could be in multiple revisions across multiple security consultants which are doing changes in the system. And those revisions then can be cherry-picked into a particular version which will replace the active version in the future. We'll see that this life cycle a little bit later. For now, what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the home screen, and what I'm going to change now is I'm going to pick my version, personal version revision, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the landscape again, and I'm going to go to the GRD repository, click. Do you see already I have the edit button, but I cannot enable the repository because I'm not in the active version. So I'm going to pick edit, and then from the destinations I'm going to change the destination from nothing to GRD test, and I'm going to save. So these destinations are coming from the BTP destinations which we are reading automatically, and basically you just pick the correct destination for the repository. You don't need to maintain them here because that's not necessary. You already have your pretty fine destination service integrated right into this particular spot. Good, we did that, and now what we want to do is we want to actually start the version creation. To do that, we need to click on that button and give it a new version number. Then each version is based on another version from which it inherits all its other configurations. So you're going to pick 1.0, and then I have some description here which we can use. We can click create, and then our new version is created with type working. What working version means is that actually it's allowed to encapsulate changes from revisions which are based on the same version, which is in this case here visible 1.2.0, and then we see the revisions are based on the same version. One interesting thing which we can see for the revisions is also, let me move that over here, is the percentage of the integrated changes for these revisions. And as you can see, currently there are 10% for the personal revision and 70% for the shared revision. So what we're going to do is we're going to cherry pick now changes into our 1.4.0 version and see how this changes. Let's pick 1.4.0, and this version is going to allow us now to pick from the revisions which are based on the same version as our current working version. Those are two revisions, and in these revisions we can check there are some changes. We can go even deeper than that, and we can also open the attributes, the expanded attributes, to see what's in there, and we can see there are some changes in the metadata, the operation, the endpoint, the response scheme, and so forth. we can add all of these to our version. And then in the personal revision, let's say we want to add only the changes for the user details get. What happens is that the system automatically recognizes that there is a conflict and opens the conflict resolution screen. As we can see in the current version, which is 1.4.0, we have these sources which we can expand. And then in the revision 120_1, which we want to add, we have this. And we can see that currently there are some values which are mismatched. So we have a value of get, and here we have a value of post. So we have to decide actually which one we want to keep. In this case, we're going to keep the current version, meaning the one on the left. This automatically resolves the conflict. And then what we can say is we want to add our repository change, which was the GRD repository, which we just added. I can expand it. We can see the destination we just added. That's the one we want. So I'm just going to add it here. Good. Then in order to see what we cherry picked, we can click on the current version and we can see that the changes are there. Wonderful. Now, next step would be we go one step back and we would like to activate this version. Until now, all the changes that we have picked into the 1.4.0 version are not active. But the fact that they're not active doesn't mean they're not accessible, because this version actually is fully accessible for testing and development purposes and can be used by specific roles which have access to the intelligent access management. The moment, however, we activate this 1.4.0, it's going to override our active version. And this, of course, is an operation which is very important. Of course, it gives us a review, which, okay, we don't need to check it one more time. We're just going to activate. And we can see 1.4.0 is now the active version. Automatically, the one that was active before became inactive. And of course, if we made a mistake for some reason, we can still activate it back again. Now, let's see how actually we can transport this across our landscape. For this purpose, we're going to go one step back and we're going to open the transport tile. And we're going to see here the versions we have as options for transport. So basically, we pick our new version. We click on step 2. We pick the system, which of course these systems are configured beforehand, where you want to transport it, in this case in quality, step 3. And here is a very, very important thing that you really need to take a good look at. And this is the comparison of what actually we are transporting. And one important thing, of course, already marked with yellow, is just the changes which are identified between the different versions. But also with red, you can see the changes which are marked for the repositories. Why those are marked with red? Because changes in repositories are not transportable between systems. If you really want at some point of time to have certain repository exactly the same into another landscape of ROIAM, there is another way to do that, and it's through import-export of the repository data. But that's not through a configuration or transport. So we click on review, we're fine, we click transport, and the procedure is started. It takes, of course, a little bit of time, but it's a live transport, which it takes all or nothing. So basically, if it's a success, as we currently have it, this means the version is transported. However, it's transported in your next landscape as an imported version, so it's not automatically becoming active, that's for sure. And so there's no risk practically. So once you have it as imported, you can still work on that version in the new system. For if the transport fails, of course, it's complete rollback and nothing is transported to the respective landscape. Now, since we spoke a lot about versions, I want to show you one diagram which probably is going to explain things a little bit better in terms of what comes from where and is based on what. And this would give you, I think, a better understanding of what you can do with versions. So a version is based or could be started or could be based on an active version, an imported version, an inactive version, or an archived version. So these are the different options. And the same goes for the revisions. So you can have a revision which is, you can have as many revisions as you want, personal or shared, which are again based on the same set of versions. Then once you create a new version, it's automatically becoming a working version. And this working version, what I showed you in the demo, is you can cherry pick changes from the revisions which are based on the same version as the new version. If a new version is transported to another landscape, it automatically becomes imported. If this version is activated, it becomes active. If the imported version is activated on a target system, it becomes active. Respectively, the version that was active becomes inactive after the activation of another version, and an inactive version can be archived. An archived version can become, a working version can also be, of course, archived. So this is the landscape. This is the life cycle, not the landscape, of versioning within our product. This opens, as you can imagine, a lot of possibilities of various changes, various owners, things that could be tested without impacting the productive configuration. Of course, changes of versions also on other landscapes apart from development, which of course requires some special permissions. But more or less, our concept is the idea is to be pretty close and based on how SAP ABAP is doing transport. So practically you can cherry pick different changes to put in a transport, which is more like a functional transport. You have seen even some of our versions are based on particular Jira tickets, so you can create revisions and versions of your configuration based on required changes, and you can actually attach those to your change logs. So you have a complete history of how a particular request or requirement has been given and how this was executed in the system. That's it for now. I hope you really like the new concept. Please let us know in the comments and stay tuned for more demonstrations on the ROIABLE Intelligent Access Management.